of you. I know it's a Friday evening. All of you must be trying and preparing to plan your weekends, and this is a very exciting evening for me personally, as well as for Indian Staffing Federation, to have the stalwarts of the industry who are with us today. And as I see, most of the people will start to joining in and obviously be part of the session. I will quickly just take the time to introduce all of you to Indian Staffing Federation. This is the industry body that represents the contract staffing industry. Today, we represent close to about 1 million workforce through our members. And our members obviously are spread across all the industries, all the roles, all the I would say 25,000 pin codes that we offer our jobs to. And it's an industry that not only is growing, but it's also an important part of the system of not only the regulatory activities from a perspective of growing employments, from a perspective of every industry today which is compliance oriented, every company which is looking at having a workforce which is a blended model wherein you have the permanent workforce, you have the contract workforce, and also we are welcoming the gig workforce for sure. So this is where we are at a hem of when the labor codes are just about to change the way we work, and we are looking forward to a great and exciting session how the employment trends are going to be changing in the second half of the year. Post-pandemic, yes, there are a lot of learnings that we have all seen. None of the people got educated about how to handle the way things have changed in the last 15 months. And I'm quite excited to look at not only the panelists, but the questions that are going to come from the audience that possibly will help us to understand this subject better, how the trends are going to be evolving. With that, may I have the honor to involve and welcome all of you. We have our session chair, Manu Sehgal. She is the corporate member of Indian Staffing Federation, but besides that, she is also the director staffing with Adecco India. We have Mr. Shyam S. Pai, who is the head HR supermarkets for More Retail. We have Ms. Chaitali Mukherjee. She's partner and leader people and organization PwC India. We have Mr. Sameer Penakalapati. I'm so sorry I cannot pronounce your surname very well. Founder and CEO, CPAL organization. And while I'm taking her name last, but she's definitely one of the most important speakers, Dr. Ankita Singh, SVP and Global Head HR for Cygnus Data Meetings. With that, I think I will not keep the audience and the panelists too much away from each other, and I'll request Manu to kindly give us the address of what we are looking forward to in the session today. Over to you, Manu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suchita. And good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome once again. I'm Manu, and I'm delighted to be in conversation with an interesting lineup of industry experts. And we are here to talk about the big trends in employment in the new normal that directly impacts your business. Now, no matter how prepared we think we are, the last few months have shown that pandemic can escalate the situation rapidly that have very real implications for organizations and economy at large. While many countries and organizations have tried to do things their way, we have witnessed an unprecedented pace of change in terms of how, where, when people are able to work. But to catch up with these developments and get ahead of the curve, we also need new strategy that will redefine our approach to the acquisition of talent and its flow. Now, I was looking at some of the reports of late, some industry perspectives on the sector driving employment growth. Now, owing to the systematic approach of lifting the lockdown, the industrial activities have picked up quite significantly. Logistics, apparel, retail are seeing an uptick in the hiring. Most recently, even the travel and hospitality are seeing a substantial recovery, and thank God for that. Yeah, an estimated 87% increase in the hotel, restaurant, travel sector, a 57% increase in the retail in June 21. Another interesting area is the telecommunications, where we see an uptick in field sales and the customer care executives role. Speaking on the performance of the IT sector, and I call it a blue-eyed IT sector, we see a 5% sequential month-on-month growth and more than 52% increase from June. a strong recovery of overall hiring sector at an estimated 15% in June 21. And this is very encouraging. So indeed, some very, very interesting times ahead. Yeah. So with this, I will kick off the conversation with a question to Shyam. Shyam, coming from a retail sector, the retail sector has seen a huge shift with COVID-19 restrictions. But as the pandemic progressed, the buyers flocked online to buy everything from food to fitness equipment, leading to a surge in e-commerce, with the more traditional businesses like the wet markets jumping on the online bandwagon. What are the key indicators for employment growth in the retail sector?
I think we have transitioned into a retail 4.0, as they call it, and the industry has leapfrogged during the pandemic into a digitally enabled and very collaborative one. As the reports say, that retail industry is poised to reach about 1.5 trillion by 2030 and create almost about 25 million new jobs. As it is, the sector contributes to almost 10% of the GDP and about 8% of the workforce of the country. The national, I think the big change that has happened is due to the restrictions. The industry has seen a big shift towards the online. While this is the need of the hour, I think the last almost about 15 to 16 months of being locked at homes is driving people crazy, and everyone is looking forward to get back to the malls, to the shops, physically shop, etc. One of the interesting things that's happening is the National Retail Trade Policy, and it is working at improving some of the conditions and remove policy barriers to the growth of the industry. Many local grocery businesses are setting up supermarket chains. The neighborhood stores are becoming supermarket chains, and we are witnessing that quite prominently, other than the big players in the industry. The consumer preference is shifting also towards neater, tidier shopping experiences. And that's another big change accelerator, I would say, that is prompted by the pandemic. So all in all, I think there is a lot of formalization of the sector itself, because the retail sector, about 10% of it is modern retail and almost 90% is informal, right? So there is a formalization that's happening. Unorganized labor market will start moving towards the more formal mainstream. And this is purely due to the availability of the number of jobs that are there, which offer timely payments, benefits, etc., rather than just working for the unorganized sector. So that's a big push in my view. The last two big changes that happened, which is the GST and demonetization, had a big impact on the formalization of the economy, right? And I think a similar thing is going to happen with the labor code changes and inclusion of the gig workers into the formal sector. And that's, I think, a good step towards generating employment, formal employment, etc. There are also, as I see, I mean, right now, all the online platforms are really getting the traction, but we will soon see that people will start hopping back into shops as the pandemic releases its clutches, so to speak. Almost about 10% of the, talking about online and how is online driving sales, about 10% of 700 million internet users in India are used to online shopping only till now, which means there is 90% potential for the rest of the folks to hop onto online. The real change that is happening is phygital, as they say, which is physical as well as digital, right? So that's the new trend that is emerging. Hyperlocal platforms are on a rise. That's generating a lot of employment. So the new normal really is about online plus offline. A lot of times I get asked this question about, is offline here to stay? Are people completely moving to online? Is this, what sort of a change is this? I think the real change that's happening is online plus offline, and that's here to stay. What we normally call as omni-channel. For the consumer, it doesn't matter which channel he is shopping, as long as it is convenient at that point in time for him. Sometimes it's convenient for the consumer to buy from home. Sometimes it's convenient to step out and really socialize with the environment. I think both these offline and online formats are going to gain a lot of traction in the next few months as the markets open up, and hopefully we don't have, let's say, the third wave.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shyam, and all fingers crossed. Let's hope no third wave coming our way. But very interesting insights. Formalization of retail sector, unorganized, and we do see a lot of organized sector moving into a organized sector during this point. And I think GST and demonetization also had a role to play there. So great, thank you so much. I also learned a new word, what was that, phygital? So a new word is coined during these times. So thank you so much for enlightening us. Moving on, Dr. Ankita, the pandemic has been a catalyst for unprecedented transformation. And we've seen, we have heard we've seen and heard Shyam also speak about that, prompting the leaders to change their views about their values and value systems, and the redefining what it means to be a leader. So how has pandemic changed leadership?
Thanks, Manu, for this question. I think drastically and completely would be the right terms. So when COVID-19 hit us, leaders were like, okay. Then we suddenly started working from home and leaders said, fine, we will manage. Then they were told probably hybrid model, fine. Focus only on people because their health and safety is, the prime concern. They said, fine. Now, if at all business is not there, how will you take care of your employees? So focus on business as well. So it's a time where things are definitely difficult for everybody around us, but leaders had to carry that responsibility of ensuring that the health and safety is definitely not compromised, but at the same time, the need of business and people is clearly and timely met. So few changes that I noticed and I can quote. First is trust. We have worked in zone where we knew that if people are working in front of you, you know what they're working on. It was difficult to understand when they are at home and you can't keep an eye on them all the time, how they are investing their time. But now I think that has shifted. They have earned and leaders have granted that trust. We have stopped questioning the use of time. Second is we have started sharing why without employees asking us, right? So if at all we are releasing people, if at all we are hiring people, if there are delays in increment, leaders have started sharing those things proactively so that people know if the organization is doing something, what's the purpose, what's the reason behind it, and they can understand it really well. Third, I would say mindful of situation, understanding why of employees. So when they are at home, a lot of time they would not be able to meet the timelines. Earlier, I'm sure leaders would have asked, what's the problem? Why can't you do it? Ensure that this is done on time next time, but now it's not happening. They ask how I can help. I understand there must be 100 problems at home. Can I help in some other way? So they are a lot more mindful than where we were earlier. Communication was always critical, but it was managed and driven in a way. We had a myth over communication, but I think even that barrier has gone down, where over communication, leaders are not shying away from over communicating. They are trying to be connected with people, even though we are working from home as and when required. And when very important thing in communication, I would say, is they have started taking and accepting feedback. It's not one way. It's not just they are giving timely inputs, but they are also getting timely inputs from the employees and their team members that what has to be done and if at all anything is going wrong. Fifth, I would say flexibility and empathy has increased exponentially. I don't think we have used the word or understood the word empathy to this level ever in past. In last 1.5 years, I think even the smallest kid, you would ask one word which is equivalent to COVID, they would say empathy. But good thing is leaders have also started practicing it. Leaders are more adaptable. We know earlier it was difficult to understand that, if you're not in front of your team members, it's difficult to create that bond. But like Shyam rightly mentioned, the right combination of technology and human intervention, we have found that right mix that will work for our employees, and leaders have adapted that really well at the right time. And when I say protective, I mean it's not just taking care of their team members now, but they have also started thinking about the future, and they've started preparing team for future. So even if tomorrow we are hit by some other pandemic or a VUCA situation, they know that how to protect their employees, and instead of asking them to leave, they would be able to place them in a better place and still keep them in the organization. And the last and the best change that I have noticed, and I would want to quote, is earlier, if you had 20 team members, probably you were dealing with 20. Now you are dealing with 100 team members. With that, I mean, every leader is a part of bigger family, which is not confined to the employees. Every leader is more open to their respective families as well. We know the name of children, we know what parents do, what the hobbies are, and we are so receptive when we see a child popping up in the same window when you're doing a very serious call. So that adaptation, being part of the bigger family and giving that comfort, has really come up well. And with these changes, I think that's the reason why leaders have really ensured that the company as well as the employees, they manage to sail through these difficult situations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ankita. And I can so well resonate with your thoughts, especially the kids coming over during the calls. Very, very familiar sight for most of us. So yes, moving on, in today, there's no discussion which is complete without the mention of technology. And we also have a tech expert amongst us today, Samir. In today's hyper competitive labor market, the challenge of hiring and retaining the right talent keeps getting tougher by the day. Now, this spells an urgent need for better ways to attract and retain top talent. How can employers leverage the right technology to hire the right talent in today's crisis?
Yeah, thanks, Manu. Technology is the key important, plays a key role in, first of all, finding a talent. Before finding a talent, curating the talent we need it for, and mapping the talent to the job requirements. And then once you identify the talent, then how do you onboard them? We're seeing across the board, employers are onboarding employees without meeting in person, digitally onboarding them, right? So there are a lot of things that's happening. So if you go through the flow of curating a prospective, right? We have a habit of, a lot of us are doing, okay, when the job pops up, that's when we start looking out for candidates. Then now, we don't have the luxury to do that. I think it's the one way to just start curating the prospect. So you plan for the next 3 months, next 6 months of potential prospective candidates that we need to. How do you curate them? What are the sources we have? So I think the technology can play a huge role in identifying where can we find the right talents of the pool of candidates, and what are the sources? How do we integrate them? How do we actually curate them and get them ready before we start hiring those, prospective candidates, at least start evaluating those prospective candidates. Then the second, once you have, let's say if you have a nicely curated, qualified candidates, that I think it's a good mix and we're getting ready. The biggest shift that happened during and the post, and I think we'll probably stay forever, is candidate engagement, right? Engaging, how do we engage these prospective, high demand, hypersensitive prospective candidates, right? So there are numerous ways of engaging the talent. Do you have a platform that engage them through text messaging, through it has an ability to take the calls through the system. If all these conversations can be stored somewhere. So what happens is, we see in the market today that same candidate being approached by 2-3 different recruiters from the same firm. Generally, candidates get really upset about it, right? But when someone has a prospective candidates in the database and has that information that a so-and-so recruiter from the organization has already contacted, here are the comments over what was the last conversation, then that would be quite helpful. Even if your second candidate contacts the candidate, at least you have information. I understand we have this conversation. Here is a new thing that to change with the job. Are you be interested? So little things like that do make a big difference. The technology can play a huge role in bringing those candidate experience, right? That's the biggest thing. Once you have passed through that candidate experience, then we have different sources. Technology can enable to integrate those sources into it and have all the information ready. And then second thing is, once you identify a candidate, once the interviews happens, then onboarding, right? We're onboarding. We're seeing people getting onboarded. If they're shipping their laptops to home, start work on it, right? How do we onboard them digitally, but you still stay connected with them, close enough to connect with them? I think those are really important. Are we complying with the, with the labor laws? Are we getting all the required paperwork is filed before we into it, right? How do we store them? Is the electronic signatures acceptable? I think all of those things, the technology is really pushing the boundaries. They're not coming anymore in-person interviews. They're happening in Zoom interviews. Then how do we really get that message? How do we really educate these candidates to, what's the company culture? What the expectations of for candidates? And how do they meet the co-workers? How do they meet the team, the core team members from the project team? So I think those are the kind of things. If we have platforms that helps them to be more collaborative and communicative, the more success we have these remote digital employees that we're bringing into the organization. So I think the COVID really pushed into how to deal with employees digitally, remotely, but still stay connected. If you've been discussing this in 2018, 2019, we would have said, no, that won't be possible. We gotta have somebody come into office, have HR sit across the table. It's a still good thing. It might still happen too, but I think we have enough tools, practices, best practices to retain and attract and also create the similar virtual experience to the candidates. Is not a temporary thing. It's probably going to stay forever.
Yeah, true that. Thank you so much, Samir. And there is a famous Peter Drucker quote that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And all my colleagues from Adecco who are there online as audience today, I'm sure they're all smiling because we use this quote quite often in Adecco. So the next one is for you, Chaitali, which reflects pretty much the same thought. By reflecting on the lessons learned during the pandemic, how can a business leader navigate future challenges by amplifying the right parts of their culture that can provide a competitive advantage and mitigate the risk of the ones that undermine strategic objectives?
Thanks, Manu. I think it's supper time. Breakfast is off the table. Isn't it? So there is no option for us to think about when did strategy eat off your culture. And that's a reality. Actually, there are three big shifts the way I look at what's been the impact of the pandemic on our lives. And when I say our lives, I'm actually thinking of organizations as organisms. And there are three big shifts that have actually impacted us. The number one being our affinity with long-staying operating models is off the table. Now, we need dynamic operating models, and a dynamic operating model requires trust on credit rather than trust on debit, number one. Number two, the capability shifts are humongous. From an assumption that capability of the leaders will actually drive us to greater success in organizations has also gone off the table, which basically means I will have to work almost simultaneously on capabilities of my leaders as well as capability across the spine. And this capability has to be seen in very different way. And at PwC, we call it 5 in a box. There are 5 key aspects of capability one would need to work. And the third one is engagement. Suddenly, amidst all this pandemic, engagement got replaced by experience. Because at the end of the day, everybody realized the basic principle behind engagement was employees stepping inside my organization so I could manage engagement. And now that control that I had over my employee to get them to step into the organization is actually gone. For most of them, it has impacted sectors differently, but like Shyam beautifully mentioned, there are sectors such as the retail, where as much as they would want to do it, the journey between off and on trade will actually continue. So I think the huge challenge from a culture perspective is how does it support the operating model, the capability and the experience? And if you ask me, and I mean it when I say it's supper time, because, at the end of the day, people always assumed or took culture for granted. People always assumed I could work around it. So we all knew that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but we only give importance to it after we have a few health issues. Similarly, we actually thought of culture only when it came and hit us on the head. And I think the best way to look at this entire problem is which are the organizations which were able to respond to the pandemic better than the others. And actually, if you look at those organizations and actually if you did a longitudinal study with them, they will stand up and say the single most important piece that kept them afloat was actually their culture. So simply put, it is late, but it's yet not too late. Let's look at it that way. And the way we may need to look at culture is, gone are the days when organization can say, this is what I want, and hence this is the culture I want to build. It's actually going to start with employee right at the center. Who are my employees that I'm seeking? Who are those employees who are ready to sign up for me, depending upon the operating model mix that I'm actually picking up? And around that, I will actually have to build a culture. Certain brass tacks will not go off the table, which is to stand up and say what is non-negotiable, or what are the critical few culture nuances or culture principles that we want to have in our organization. But simply put, if you ask me, Manu, what is going to be a big differentiator from a culture perspective? It's going to be very clear about what we want as culture, not the big bold statements, but the simple things, which we call as the way of life. Being very clear about that, and then ensuring that I enable my employees right from the day they are joining to the day they are leading to understand that in the true sense. Because culture is, at PwC, we define it as the intangible way, what I feel, what I think, what I believe. Yet it is something that stays on its own. And if it is something like that, I will have to ensure that people experience it. So, the example that Samir was giving around employment, that's a starting point of my culture. I cannot align the person to the organization's way of working and thinking if I haven't built commitment right at the time of hiring. So I think that's what it is. Single most important differentiator, say what is the simple form of your culture? What does it mean? And ensure everybody understands it and feels it exactly the same way. Damn difficult, but yeah, that's what it is.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shetali. Very, very insightful. Our next portion is a round robin where all the speakers will share their insights on the same topic. And I'll start off with Samir this time, followed by Ankita, Chaitali, and then Shyam. Yes, so there is a true consensus that the impact of pandemic is long-term one. Yeah. So it looks like the COVID situation is an unexpected catalyst for our foray into the future of work. How and what should organizations learn from this? And how can we capitalize on the future employment trends to be in the winning position? Sameer, your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a very broad question too. So I don't know where to start, but I'm going to say a few things. The future employment, I think it's going to be more on, as Chaitali was talking about, candidate experience, employee experience. I think that starts from there. It's going to be the shift in the employee categories that we're going to see. The traditional job roles are going to expire or going to obsolete almost 1/3 of those job titles and be replaced with the new ones, right? So that means it's an opportunity for upskilling if the existing employees are bringing new skill sets into the organizations. So if that shift happening in such a short time, that's not something that we have never seen in the past, right? So are we ready to upskill 1/3 to half 50% of our workforce in the next 5 years so that we can stay competitive, can bring new products, new services to the market, and can still be competitive in the global markets? So I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see what's going to happen, how companies going to adapt that. But I think I personally believe, I'm just being a technologist, and I think it's going to play a major role for companies to make the shift, rather comfortable and easily. I think without the technology, those changes would be very hard to. So companies who adapt the technology, companies who embrace and train workforce, identify the needs in advance, I think will thrive, will probably be a global players, and companies who stay back and adapting of those changes, and especially, being very technology centric platforms, I think they're going to lag in the future. I think that's my perspective.
Thank you, Sameer. Over to you, Ankita.
Yeah, I think Sameer covered almost everything that I wanted to cover, so I'll just keep it short. One, I would say upskill, because we know things are changing at a pace where if at all we need to exist, we want to exist, we know what the future is asking. So obviously we don't know where we are headed. We don't know where we will be in 2025, but you have to predict it really well with the help of data, and you have to ensure that your organization is upskilling at the right pace at the right time. Second is embrace technology. There's no running away from it. You can't survive if you are not okay with it, no matter in what percentage you're using it, but you have to be there. And the third and the most critical would be the culture. Nothing is perfect, no matter how great our culture was or how great it has been developed during pandemic. But we know gig, we don't know what percentage of gig would be there. We don't know what percentage of millennials will be there, whether it's going to be a complete hybrid or a remote or work from home. So organizations, with respect to upskilling or embracing technology, or with respect to culture, they have to stay adaptable, flexible, and nimble throughout, because there's no stoppage, there's no new normal. They are just going to be next normals, and we have to be prepared and ready to face them.
Thanks, Ankita. And that's exactly the topics that we're discussing in this webinar today. Over to you, Chaitali.
I think some great points from Sameer and Ankita. I think unbelievably so. Skills of the future is going to actually decide organizations' relevance, and skills is one thing that organization, as much as they want to believe they own it, they don't own it. Employees own it, right? So that's quite a paradoxical situation. I want to own the skills, but I don't own the talent completely for life, right? So how do I actually keep them completely enabled? I think if I had to choose one thing that organizations should learn to capitalize from the situation, it's a big word, but it's a reality. It is our ability to be comfortable with the agility. Because our operating models, our strategy that we used to create for 5 years time frame is gone forever. And the challenge is organizations are yet wanting to actually, it's like a small kid trying to play peekaboo, right? I'll shut my eyes and it will go off. The reality is this is not going. The fact that the cycle times have actually reduced. They have become 5 months from 5 years, which basically means I will have to accept the fact that almost paradoxically, but simultaneously, I will have to concentrate on zooming in and zooming out, which basically means I will have to understand macro economics and the impact of my sector and my play as an organization, as an individual, as a leader, as even an employee in the larger scheme of things, and almost zoom it into today. And to me, and that's why I really loved what Ankita said, the challenge is going to be that skill. It is grossly underrated. We all know how many people in our lifetimes do we meet who have that ability to zoom in, zoom out at that level. It's very rare, which basically means it's a massive mindset shift that we are actually wanting. And if organizations need to build that kind of a mindset, it would mean they will have to do away with a lot of systems, a lot of processes that have made them who they are. The whole productivity and control mindset will actually have to go. And I think that's a huge, huge shift. So we all are here. We'll get to see what happens in the future. But yeah, I think that's what it is.
I guess we are in for a lot of unlearning, relearning, not the conventional ways of doing things. Yes, absolutely. And love to hear your views also, Shyam.
Thanks. I think very relevant points made by my fellow panelists. Just want to add one important point about culture, and I think Chaitali spoke about it in a lot of detail. What we have to realize is that the millennials have entered the workforce, and I think there is a shift in thinking, right? I mean, the same things that worked for us in the past will not work for us in the future. The new generation is largely self-managed, does not need instructions, does not need dictated methods. They just need more empowerment. They are very, very resourceful. So often in our organization, we keep referring to something known as TDQC, which is transaction, data, query, and conversation, right? So the TDQ part of it, which is the transaction, data, query part of it, all of it, we see it getting digitalized or enabled through chatbots, et cetera. But I think the most important one is about the ability to connect with people and have conversations timely at various points of the employee life cycle. And that's going to play a huge part. Also, I think there was also a point about control, right? I mean, what are we trying to unlearn here? There are a few things that we should unlearn. The need to know everything, right? I mean, before we start. It's almost impossible these days because of the overload that is there in terms of information and methods. The need to be in control all the time. Somebody at the helm of affairs is, trying to control the whole. I think that's a misnomer today. And the need to lead all the time. That's not probably required anymore. There are a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid. We actually saw this during the pandemic, right? The frontline workers almost just led the whole country, right? Whether it's the medical profession or the retail employees or the police on the front lines, I think there was a lot of leadership that was shown. So those are indicators of the changing elements of culture in our society. I think we need to be open to all of the imbibing all of those in the future of our work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shyam. And moving on, my next question is directed towards Ankita, and very interesting one, I would say, and something that is there top of our minds for all of us. And we are talking about getting people back to work safely. So these are the times which no one has experienced before. So what are the top of the mind issues you are seeing being faced by employees with respect to pandemic?
With respect to getting them back to work, Manu, if the question is when they are back in office, what's the prime concern looking at the current situation?
It's more about issues that you think the employees are facing, because during this time, during the pandemic, there is no more the corridor talks. or solutioning over a cup of coffee near the pantry, no canteen talks happening, and things like that. So with all of this vanishing away, how do you promote the team bonding, and how do you think that the employees are taking it up during the pandemic? Getting that collaboration in place. Yeah.
I think Samir covered a bit of it. I think the only median mode is technology. And Chaitali beautifully covered that how we have moved from purely employee engagement to employee experience. And I think that's the key, that's the magic. There was a time when we were too worried about distance. Now, I don't think it's all about distance. And, there was a quote that we quite often used, out of sight is out of mind. But pandemic really proved it wrong. Everybody was out of sight, but nobody was out of mind. So we were more careful, we were more concerned. We so much wanted to connect well, and wanted to check what is happening with your family. Forget about work. Let's talk if everything is fine at your end. So the same trend or approach has to be maintained, because even if now few of us are back in office, I think there is need of safety where we will have to maintain that virtual physical distance. You have very rightly said virtual water coolers, or we just used to go out for a cup of tea and those gossips. Everybody is missing that, but that's the necessity, that's the need of the organization, and that's the only way you can get people together. There are a lot of things companies are doing. You must have heard about 30-minute video tea time, where people just come together, they talk about their interest, how their week was, what's the plan for next week, where it's everything but work. And that has to be done, because you need to know individuals personally. Rest, we all know, when they have been hired with the expertise that they know their work so well, they'll do it. So from HR or from the managers, their responsibility is to create platforms where employees can share and celebrate their uniqueness. That's the only connecting point. We recently did something which was a great hit. We created a jigsaw platform. So we asked people who would want to connect, because freshers, when they join, or new joinees, they just know their team members, their managers, and with whom they would be working. What about the rest of the organization? Because earlier, obviously, the induction program used to be very extensive. So we asked if you would want to know more people. You cannot force these engagement or experience activities. So we asked them if you would want to be part of this. And people who said yes, we involved them in jigsaw group. So you have a piece of puzzle, but you don't know where you will land. And the group in which you land, you have to know a little more. And then you create storyboards about the people with whom you have interacted, where you start projecting and talking about their family, their interest, their role in the organization. So it's a mix of personal and professional. So that has really helped each one of us knowing the other person really well. If I call my chairman, he would say, I know how workstations look like now. That was never the case earlier. But at the end, I would say, because it's now a shared responsibility, earlier employee engagement or experience was primarily thought to be with HR. Now we have accepted that HR alone cannot take care of it. And every manager, every individual present in the organization has to play their role. So let's not overdo it. Sometimes we feel, or we are so passionate about it, that we feel one activity or initiative that we have identified will be loved by everybody. There are chances that people love to be part of it, but they don't have time. They have more important things to handle at this point in time while they're working from home. So we need to have a clear-cut check on how effective our virtual or launched initiatives are. And the second and the most important, who all want to be part of it, because everybody's current situation is different. I think if we take care of these 2 points and we stick to the mix of human and tech, we will be able to ensure that the belongingness factor is not going away from the culture that we have already maintained in the organization.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ankita. And a quick question to Chaitali following this. More and more employees are now beginning to invest in themselves to set themselves up for a career success in the future, and they're not banking on what their organizations have to offer. So how can employers leverage this phenomenon?
So I think that's a very interesting pursuit on the part of employees. And to be very candid, Manu, it's not something new. It's just that it has only got accentuated, and more importantly, organizations are getting to see it now. Earlier, there wasn't, and technology has been one of the biggest players over here, which has actually opened it up. And the big tech giants who are making learning happen are actually feeding the data back to organizations and saying, well, do you know there are so many employees of yours who are actually doing, or they're trying to learn this new skill. Earlier also it was happening, but in the absence of analytics, organizations didn't know. The way I look at it is this is a huge opportunity for organizations, two ways. Number one, organizations can actually see what are the motivations of employees depending upon what they are doing, what they are learning. Because all of us as individuals is somewhere try to pick up new skills around what we believe is important for our careers, as well as what we believe will keep us relevant. And a very important piece that organizations could do to drive relevance for employees around organizational future is to get people more and more aware about what are the skills organization believes is going to be important. At a time when organizations used to think it is the responsibility of the organization, of course it is. Employees' relevance for the business is important for the organization. But if employees are ready to take an initiative, at least let them know how they can keep themselves relevant. And this does not need the organization to actually go and talk to them and say, you know what, we want you to take up this skill or something. Just talking about the skills that will make them relevant for their business is a huge opportunity, number one. Number two, there is a huge data that the organizations can actually drive from this to understand if the organization itself is not operating in the space which is relevant for the future, what kind of attrition they can be ready to face. So how do you use this information to drive relevance and also manage engagement and attrition is the way I would think organizations should be looking at it. And analytics can actually play an amazing role over here. Our ability to partner with these tech giants to stand up and say, so tell me, across all levels, what kind of learning are my people showing interest in? And we all know, all big companies which are in the space of tech learning know that about 87% or more people enroll but never finish. But that enrollment is a very interesting data point. That enrollment talks about motivation and interest. And if I have that information available with me, I can use it in multitude of ways. So I think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, wonderful. And I totally agree with you. Coming back to Shyam, very quickly, and this is the last question amongst the speakers before we open the floor for questions from the audience. I know there's a couple of them pouring in, so we leave some space there. So Shyam, what are the evolving business needs and employment models that the retail industry is adopting post-pandemic?
Sure. So I think just to give you a context, all the staffing service providers who are on this particular call are probably very aware of how retail operates, etc. But I'll just take a minute. Staffing or manpower cost, rent and utilities, these three are the big costs that any retail entity would incur. And I think manpower takes a lion's share of it, right? In the sense, during the pandemic, we saw that there were certain formats which got the opportunity to be open, like, for example, supermarkets. On the other hand, hypermarkets, which were located in the malls, got shut down. Apparel retailers, consumer durables, all of them suffered a long duration of not doing their physical businesses. And therefore, many of them moved to offline plus online. There was a restriction in terms of number of hours of operation, and we did that as well in our business. So with all of these changes happening, one of the biggest thing that we are looking at is how do we alter our cost structures effectively in response to market conditions very continually. So that's a big challenge for us. Increasingly, there is a lot of movement towards digitization of point of sale. in-store operations and inventory tracking mechanisms. And this will continue as technology improves. There's also a lot of intelligent optimization and rostering that we have been doing, and many retailers are relying on this. Essentially to say that, you require staff when it is required. The rest of the time, we should have the flex in order to really deal with the peaks and the troughs, right? So simplification of jobs is an important one. Fungible workforce, which can do just not one type of job, but a variety of jobs. Training and skilling them to do these jobs is also an important aspect of what's required at the moment. So the role that the skill development companies and sector skill councils, certification, building credibility amongst the workforce, creating better employability. It's not just about, whether employment opportunities are available, but its employability. Is the right workforce available for the right kind of task? I think that's the real big challenge. Having said this, although it has turned upside down, the new normal is not going to be anything like the pre-pandemic times. And there are some interesting trends emerging, and we will watch that space.
Definitely, Shyam. And that's a lot of collective insights. Let's now hear from the audience. Suchita, over to you. Do we have, I see some questions pouring in.
I think, first of all, thank you so much for the very, very insightful session that we have had from all of you. I think I can speak on behalf of at least the participants that I see and the questions that I've already poured in. I know some of them could look like a little longish in terms of the question, but just to be fair, we'll have to put it across to them. I think I'll start with Chaitali with the question that's come her way. We are an organization born in COVID time where none of us have ever met each other physically. We have felt this as a big impediment for us to define the organization culture. How are the organizations defining culture in these online times?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, Ankur. Thanks for asking that question. There are two things that I want to call out. What you are describing as not having experienced is actually not the culture, but the experience that employees get when they step into the organization. It's very important for organizations to be very articulate, like I mentioned, about what is our organization's culture. And once we are very clear about that organization culture, we can have various ways in which we can get employees to experience it. The biggest challenge actually is for people who are joining organizations right now, because organizations have themselves not been able to define the shape form, because earlier the whole definition of culture and engagement was one big round circle, right? So we thought we're giving the experience that's akin to a culture. But culture is going to be distinct, which is actually going to stand out. And I will do everything that I can as part of my experience choices to make that culture come alive. I think that part, regardless of what state and form and what employee model or a workforce model I have, organizations will have to take time out to define. And I think even if I'm an organization, there are tons of organizations which have actually found an opportunity in the challenge and have created new organizations. For them, the biggest differentiator is going to be how do they define what will make them stand out from an experience perspective. And that's where they will start defining the culture that they want to build. So if the organization hasn't done that, it's never too late for us to actually define it now. Hope I answered your question, Ankur.
Definitely, you have given us the food for thought for next few questions that could come, but unfortunately, we'll be able to take only few. There is another question that's come, and Dr. Singh, you might want to address this one. During pandemic, candidates are shopping with their offers, and Manu, I'm sure this is a very close-hearted question.
Absolutely, I want to hear the answer.
Yeah, so, which is making hiring industry unstable and getting involved on wrong foot, where we are as companies are really struggling with deadlines. How can we lower the impact or can save our skin in the current? I don't know if can save. Maybe I would put this question to both Dr. Singh and to Shyam also, because I'm sure from the other side of the table, you'll have a different perspective. Over to both of you.
Yeah, Shyam, you would want to go first?
I think, okay, I mean, during the pandemic, have people shopped for offers? Yes, of course. I mean, that's a reality. And I don't think it's connected to the pandemic alone, right? I mean, it's a fairly democratic trend, I would say, across the years. And I think it's also because of the increased number of opportunities in a different sector. I mean, various sectors are getting prominence during different times, and the pandemic is one such time. So I don't really see this as something that you can really address or deal with. It's something that's emerging, and every organization has to deal with it in their own ways, I suppose.
Dr. Ankita, you want to take this question?
Yeah, I don't think if the answer is the right answer or not, but my take is, see, we have been always talking about customer being the king, right? And we have molded all our strategies, systems, employees need as per the customer. We have always accepted that we'll do everything to please the customer. Now, when we have employees as the king, where they have so many options, you have to do some changes in the system, which can probably meet their needs, the restriction why they are leaving the organization if they are leaving, and you have to identify if at all they are not joining your organization, why they are not joining. So a lot has to do with respect to branding. When you initiate the process, if person has already accepted your offer, where is that communication gap where you could not clearly communicate, or some other person could communicate in a much better fashion, or could give a much better offer that the person was attracted towards that organization. So that's my first take. Something we have to understand ourselves. We have to evaluate our system, that are we going wrong anywhere. But I would agree to an extent what Shyam said, that not everything is under our control. Sometimes we are perfect, but somebody would have some other preference. The second point is, obviously there is uncontrollable pocket and there is a controllable pocket. Can you do everything about the person not accepting your offer? Probably not. What any organization can do is, and that's something that pandemic has taught us, there will be a phase where you will not have enough projects, or you will not have enough employees within the system. You have to really prepare your team members, no matter what projects they are working on, but you have to also predict future in a way that your internal system is so well and strongly built that when there is such a critical and crucial need, you can move or play around with your resources, those are available, so that you don't face the heat of others not joining it at the right time. So these are the only two options that we have tried, and we have been able to survive. But can we put a full stop to people not joining and saying no to offer and just continue shopping? No, there's no end to it. We just have to find solutions depending on our sector and what best we can do.
Manu, would you like to add to this, because a staffing company will have a very, very different take on it, and possibly your experience will be very, very important to hear from.
Yeah, so like Shyam and Ankita have mentioned, I think every organization has their own strategy to deal with it. Yes, of course, what we've seen in the recent past, what we have observed is, there's a lot of window shopping which is happening. Was it not happening earlier, like Shyam said? No, it was happening, but there's a uptick in it. And we see largely, sector specific. I think it's a lot more in IT that we see than in any other sector, which to me, the plus sign to the positive side to this is that there are so many job offers. There are so many opportunities out there. But then how do we control? I think one key thing that we follow in Adecco is the engagement right from the offer to the person is joining. It's a very, very conventional way of doing it, but I guess that's one key thing that one should do is to really be engaged, because you know, as a recruiter, as a hiring manager, you do keep getting those senses if there's something going wrong. And of course, we heard Samir also initially, technology also can help, because there's only limited things that you can do manually with the person calling, etc., etc. So there are ways that some tools and technologies can help you gauge this, so that you mitigate your you can't avoid it. There's no zero aborts or zero dropouts, but what you can do is have your plan Bs and plan Bs ready and mitigate the risk. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's a time that it's a good time for the employees. If I were to look at least the IT sector, other sectors maybe a mixed feeling. In fact, one of the audience member has put across a question which maybe Chaitali you could look at. There is definitely a change in the culture which is coming because of the accessibility that we have due to being online, and hours have kind of got mixed up. There is driving time which has got taken off, but it just means that you can directly come online and you can stay online for longer hours. Is the expectation becoming a norm is one of the questions that has come. So I mean, from a culture perspective, do you think this will set in the culture perspective?
So I think, Suchita, this is a huge problem. And I think as leaders, we all know it, we all acknowledge it. Can an organization define a culture around it? Yes, of course. But I don't think this is a responsibility of the organization. This is a responsibility of individual leaders, managers, and just individuals. Because if there are certain things where we can hope for the organization to define norms, and there are some places, as individuals, we have to be a bit more responsible. And, Ankita spoke a little while ago about the whole fact around how are leaders thinking differently and practicing empathy. This is a classic example of practicing empathy. The reality of life is we will never have a work-life balance. The future of work is about work and life coexisting. As managers, we have to understand and appreciate that for businesses to exist and to continue, the normal human being, which is the employee, has lent his or her house as a workplace. And for almost 15 months, businesses were able to continue because of that. Now, in any relationship, there has to be a balance of give and take. If as managers, we are not able to respect that fact that employees have allowed us their workplaces, which are basically their home, and we don't respect that and we don't allow them to maintain that balance, we are going to lose. We'll more often lose better people than the bad people, right? So it's a choice, and no organization can exist with all the best people leaving. So every time a manager has this inordinate demand from his or her team, they need to remember the clock is ticking.
Absolutely. There are some points that definitely are resonating because, 15 months has been a long stretch. I think initially 6 months, people may not have realized it much that, how personal life and professional life just merged into one. And people were able to give in to the fact that, I am available. But I think over a period of 15 months, things are changing. And while we are not sure if work from home is coming to an end or not, but yes, for sure, people's fatigue is showing up, being available for more than the existing number of work hours. Just able to take one more question and then we'll have to call. So just allow me another few minutes. This is a question directed to Dr. Ankita and Chaitali, and maybe Samir, if you can also add, because this is a question relevant from your perspective. Whether the use of AI or different analytical techniques are helpful in defining new methodologies for TA, employee engagement, attrition control, etc.
Yeah, it is. So I think Chaitali and Samir both will add. I'll just quickly say, when you talk about getting effectiveness in the processes, when you talk about reduction of mundane work, which is not required on daily basis, at least by you, where you can put in your time substantially somewhere else where it is needed. When we talk about data and technology today, where everything is real time and it has to be taken and used within a stipulated time, that enablement, understanding and formulating strategies as per the need, or making all these processes more personalized. When I talk about these 4 or 5 factors, I think use of AI, ML, that's the only thing which is strengthening or enabling our, people related processes. So yes, if the question is it important? Very much.
Actually, I completely agree to what Ankita said. The reality is, it's the question is off the table, whether it is important or not. I think what we should perhaps think about is, considering it is on the table, what is the value human can actually add as a result? So assuming there are repetitive, there are, basic or filtration activities that AI can do for me, the window that I get for human intervention can actually be put to amazing use, which is, for instance, most of the focus so far has been on checking on skill. And like I've been mentioning, the future is not about skill fitment because skills have a very short shelf life. It's going to be culture fitment. So can AI be used to a certain extent for filtration and for skill fit? And we go into deeper analysis in terms of hiring beyond AI with the human intervention.
Yeah, I can add a quick point here. AI has been playing, and I think it's going to be a major role in defining as Chaitali and Dr. Ankita was both talking about. If you look into the candidate perspective, what's most important is the skills and the cultural fit or the personality fitment to the job. Those two are different things, right? Traditionally, when we look into recruiters talk to a candidate, it's a very keyword driven, right? Look into what's the skill set we need, what a candidate has, right? But that's just the half of it. But the other half of it is becoming more important post-pandemic is the fitment to the job, the personality traits of a candidate. How do we measure that? There is no way to measure, but there are so many trained algorithms that exist in the market today based on different, psychological theorems and theses around, which actually can predict pretty well about candidate fitment to the job, not just on the skill side wise, but also personality traits wise. You could, check it out. The CPAL's AI personality algorithm, it actually gives you almost like a chart on a candidate personality traits. When you map them, in fact, AI also can not only map, but also put the ranking algorithm on it, right? Okay, this 70% the candidate personality traits to the job map to another 80% of the skill set match combination 70% map. Then what happens is when you have, let's say, database of 50,000 prospective candidates or maybe 10,000 prospective candidates, there is no way humanly possible you can go actually look into who would be the best fit. But what if the AI can dwell into these stats and data and give you top 10 candidates? Now you have a finite list of top 10 candidates. You can actually engage the candidate, talk to them, spend more time, and create that, that bonding with the candidates. You create a more likely that candidate might accept your job and get onboarded to the candidate. So a lot of times, if you don't use technology, then you're actually, like a robocalling a candidates, right? Quick checking. And they have the same experience when other 10 staffing or corporates are calling the candidate. Instead, now you have more data points about the candidate, talk to them, talk about. You create that first experience that they're going to stay and probably, become an employee of you. So I think AI is going to play a defining role in hiring and creating the first experience of candidates before coming into an organization.
Brilliant. I think, yes, definitely AI and everything that is coming our way is support that's going to be very, very engaging, not only from a TA employee engagement perspective, but there are much more analytics that is going to come out, which are going to be helpful. And obviously, it's a learning process for all of us. Sorry, we are running out of time, and I just have to quickly thank you for your time. First of all and last of all, I think our industry has seen the warriors in front in the form of the HR leaders that have been part of the industry, and be it the founders like Sameer who has joined us, or Chaitali who's driving from a PwC perspective. But must say, Manu, Shyam, and Dr. Ankita, you guys have all championed a time that will be case studies in itself, not only for your own organizations, but I am sure for the industry to take notes of. The last 1.5 years, the learnings that all of you have possibly put across, and your teams have seen the way you have dealt with the respective situations in your organizations. Will be something for us to learn, and for years it will become the reference points for most of the people to take notes from, because it's not been a year anybody has been taught to handle. It has not been a year which has been handed out to you guys in terms of how to manage it, but all of you have helped to sail your organizations through, and the industry has survived looking at various learning points from all of you. So at the end, just wanted to thank all of you for the time that you have given us today. And I'm sure everybody in the Friday evening is not only gaining this as a lighter, on a lighter, so they got some learnings, but they got to discuss something that is a little painful to what is happening in the scenario, be it the job offer, multiple job offers. So some people are finding it happy situation, some people are finding it a difficult situation because they have to compromise because of that. So it's a lopsided situation, and always has been. Thank you so much, Manu, for taking out the extra time and to prepare for these sessions with all the special leaders that we have today. Thank you for everyone that you have made time, Dr. Ankita, Shyam, Chaitali, Sameer. This has been a very, very learning experience for us. And thank you, CIPAL team, which has come as a sponsor for this particular event. And I'm sure from the discussion we have had, you will also understand that it is a software that is helping a lot of organizations today in the AI space and the talent and recruiting space, and in a must try out that we should look at from a perspective of not only as a partner, which is for ISF, but as a partner to the staffing industry. With that, thank you so much, and we come to a close. I hope to see you very soon in the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.